You're on the Bible Forum. We're here every Sunday night to talk about life, wherever it attaches itself to us. I want to talk to you tonight about the attack on religious liberty, how it continues. Democrats who famously booed the mention of God in their party platform now have condemned religious liberty and praised the religiously unaffiliated. The Washington Examiner reported the Democrat National Committee approved a resolution outlawing God. This at a summer meeting in San Francisco. The DNC adopted a resolution concerning the non-religious. It explains that the religiously unaffiliated demographic has tripled in the last 20 years, now representing 25% of the overall American population and 35% of those under the age of 30. 25% of the American population. If you turn on the television, you would think it was 90%. You watch the news, you would think it was at least 80%. It's only 25%. 35 if you're under 30, but people under 30 really haven't got a chance at life yet. They don't know what's going on. All of this while a church has evolved that is nothing more than an entertainment form. I know, that's my opinion. Further, they overwhelmingly share the Democrat Party's values. And they support same-sex marriage, open borders, and so much more. Translation? They are anti-American, and they are anti-God. I say that because God represents absolute, immutable standards of morality. This crowd says that nothing like that exists. They're anti-American. They don't like our form of government. They don't like what we stand for. And it's not just a particular president or a particular party. They don't like what this nation represents. And the non-religious have often been subjected to unfair bias and exclusion in American society, particularly in the areas of politics, policy making, where assumptions of religiosity have long dominated. That's what these people are saying. It's not true. So, it goes on to say, whereas those most loudly claiming that morals, values, and patriotism must be defined by their particular religious views have used those religious views with misplaced claims of religious liberty to justify public policy that has threatened the civil rights and liberties of many Americans, including but not limited to the LGBT community, women, and ethnic and religious non-religious minorities. Translation? The overtly immoral and the anti-God crowd. So they passed a resolution. Be it resolved that the Democratic National Committee, they're wrong before they start. There is no such thing as a Democratic National Committee. And the Democrat National Committee is not at all Democratic. So they don't even know who they are. But they say, 1, the value, ethical soundness, and importance of religiosity of the religiously unaffiliated demographic, a group of Americans who contribute in innumerable ways to the arts, sciences, medicine, business, law, military, their communities, the success of the party, and prosperity of the nation. And 2, that religiously unaffiliated Americans are a group that as much as any other advocates for rational public policy based on sound science and universal humanistic values and should be represented, included, and heard by the party. The Secular Coalition of America embraced this statement, saying, quote, non-religious Americans want to work with people of all faiths to build an effective government that serves and protects all of our rights equally. That by Sarah Levin, Director of Government Affairs for the organization. At the end of the day, she says, it is critical that all political parties embrace and work with the secular community to ensure that policy is driven by science and evidence, not sectarian belief. Religiously unaffiliated Americans strongly identify with secularism and will fight to protect the separation of church and state. WorldNet Daily reported in June the DNC, in apparent acknowledgement that the party has a God problem, hired a religious outreach director. So what's going on? Well, the God haters have found language that seems to paint them as the reasonable among us. They're not the pagans, they're secularists. They're not God haters, they're religiously unaffiliated. Now you do realize that left to themselves, human beings will be selfish, don't you? You don't believe that? Have you not seen a 2-year-old? That's how we begin. It has to be trained out of us. Selfism is the reaction to any external moral standard that God represents. Our social, legal, political, moral standard is based on God. It says so in our documents and the Bible. Those who resent what traditional American values represent do so only after rejecting God in their lives. You see, the battle is not political. It's moral, meaning it's religious. Marriage in Alabama is another illustration. The ripples from the U.S. Supreme Court's Obergefell decision creating same-sex marriage, a ruling the Chief Justice said was unrelated to the Constitution, continues to be felt. One of the biggest impacts has been the persecution of Christian florists, photographers, cake bakers, who declined to promote same-sex marriage because of their religious beliefs. Alabama lawmakers apparently have had enough. The law went into effect a week ago, Friday, that eliminates the state's role in approving marriages, making it largely a record keeper. AL.com, AL for Alabama, reported the law makes obtaining a marriage license as simple as filling out a state form and returning it. No ceremony, no signature by an officiant, such as a minister or a judge, is required. Applicants simply put their names on the form, have it notarized, and send it back. At the 10th Amendment Center blog, Mike Meharry said that while the change in the law may seem like semantics, it's quite significant. It ends the requirement to get state permission before getting married. The state will now record signed contracts between consenting individuals. In effect, it removes the state from the approval process and relegates it to a mere record keeper. He pointed out the law will maintain a few state requirements governing marriage. For example, minors between the ages of 16 and 18 still must obtain parental permission before applying to record a marriage. The state will not record a marriage if either party was already married. And the parties cannot be related by blood or adoption as already stipulated in state law. But civil or religious ceremonies will no longer be required. Think about that. In the case of couples already married, will that mean the new marriage is not a marriage in the eyes of Alabama? Or does Alabama simply not care once a person is married the first time? Meharry said the law is a step toward returning to the traditional Western custom in which the state had little or no involvement in marriage, even though it was a legal contract as well as a religious institution. Marriage in medieval Europe technically fell under the legal jurisdiction of the Catholic Church, with priests officiating weddings at the door of the community church. However, it was ultimately a private arrangement that did not require a third party in order to be considered legitimate. Now, why are we comparing U.S. policy to medieval European law? Medieval law was not Bible-based. He did note the state's role in defining and regulating marriage, quote, has become a contentious issue and places a burden on government officials torn between the legal requirements of their jobs and their personal religious convictions. By limiting the state's role in marriage, the legislation will allow Alabamans to structure their personal relationships as they see fit, without interference or approval from the government. He said that removing state meddling in marriage will render void the edicts of federal judges that have overturned state laws defining the institution. The founding generation never envisioned unelected judges issuing ex-cathedral pronouncements regarding the definition of social institutions, and the Constitution delegates the federal judiciary no authority to do so. Now, it's interesting to note that all that was probably due to a general religious attitude enshrined in our founding documents. States stepped up to keep babies from being born with congenital defects, and probably to protect young people from their own stupidity. Protecting the state in the process from having to take care of babies and people when the immature and ungodly began playing at marriage. I foresee this Alabama law catching on in other states. It takes the government out of the system, saves them billions of dollars. It limits the lawsuits and allows people to simply move about in their relationships without having to shell out thousands of dollars for a divorce. It's a win-win in today's moral climate. The only one to lose might be the children or women who get rejected, left on the doorstep themselves. And oh yeah, God. And the nation as we slip into a greater moral degradation. But who cares about that as long as we're having fun? Think about it. Why does the government get involved in my marriage? I am married by a clergy in the sight of God. If I just want to get together with somebody and fill out some forms, legal forms to make sure that our properties are all taken care of, and go live together, what's the problem? Oh, it's immoral. Yeah, so it is. But people who do that are people who are not really concerned about church. And people who are not concerned about church are people who are not concerned about absolute standards of morality. They might say that they are, but they have their own opinion as to which ones are important. And so we have two classes of people. People who want to stand before God and make this a significant event and binding between each other and Him. And those who just want to get together, have sex, make babies, put their money together, be whatever. And when they don't like it, they just walk away. They can do that with a contract, can't they? It's what we used to do. It's interesting how we get used to things because, well, we need this protection, we need that protection. The state stumps up, and now we've got all these rules, and now we've got a state that says we're not in that anymore. It's gotten too crazy. And more states will get out of it. Alabama is not a liberal state. It'd be interesting to see if the conservative states are the ones that start backing out, and the liberals are the ones that stay in place because they get the money. I don't know. It's interesting.